life you truly want. Experience the Genna effect. I'm Vincent Genna, psychic therapist, medium, and spiritual teacher. Become unstoppable. Learn the secret that's holding you back.
Welcome to the Genna effect. I'm Vincent Genna, psychic therapist, medium, spiritual teacher, and author of The Secret That's Holding You Back. I like to bring to you material that is going to help you unblock and release your passions and purpose and anything that may be getting in the way of you creating the life of your dreams. Well, sometimes I do that by bringing on special guests, and today is no exception. Today is one of the incredible special guests that I've had on this podcast. That's right. This gentleman has written over 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical applications in everyday life, including his new book, God Talk. That's a special book. Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power. It's a book in his Common Sentience book series. Now, he is the best-selling author. I'm not going to tell the title of the book yet, whereas he wrote a series of books, 9 of them, 7 of which made it to the New York Times best-selling list. And book 1 was on that list for 134 weeks. His books have been translated into over 37 different languages, which is unprecedented. And I think I gave away the guess by just telling you book 1. That's right. The series of books were called Conversations with God, and my special guest today during this fabulous holiday season is none other than Neale Donald Walsch. So please join me in this conversation with Neale. And back then, didn't they still call them, besides a radio personality, disc jockeys?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I was
back then. And I used to be a professional singer, actor, and dancer. So we have our entertainment background, and it seemed to just go transition right into this type of work.
I did professional singing, acting, and dancing as well.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did a 2-year run. Why did I say that? It wasn't a 2-year run. It was a 1-year run in a play called I Do, in which I played.
I Do. Real well.
I played the male lead in that show for a year. And then I did Henry Higgins in The Music Man. And I directed many. So I've directed probably 64 shows in my life. I've been involved in live theater for 50 years.
Oh my goodness. I was 35. And one of my claim to fame is, besides musical theater, is I was in the movie Grease with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. I was a singer, actor, and dancer. That's when I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
what was your favorite role on stage?
I was Muddle the Tailor in Fiddler on the Roof. Then as I got a little bit older, I wound up being Perchik. And then my final role in Fiddler on the Roof was with Paul Servino. I was Mortka, the innkeeper, because I was that much older. So I was able to play 3 different roles in one musical in my career.
That's great. My favorite role that's what I was thinking of earlier. I did do a 2-year run in the play 1776, and I was John Adams. I did John Adams for 2 years in that show, and it was a remarkable. It was an outdoor theater. It was a summer theater, an outdoor theater, and then they went indoors during the winter time, but outdoors that's in the summertime. So we did a 2-year run of that show.
That is fabulous. Why doesn't that surprise me that that's what you did? Well, your word certainly has gotten around in all different ways, in all different media, from radio to stage, now in books, and when you were doing in person and now online to be able to reach, and now you're reaching worldwide. Neale, did you ever expect that when you were that performer on stage as John Adams? Did you ever expect it to be where it is today?
No, nobody could imagine such a thing. So right. The answer is no. I did the show 1776. What made it special was it opened in 1976. And
Oh,
on the evening of July 4th, 1976, we had a special performance, and every church bell in town, because we had an outdoor theater, we were an outdoor stage. So we had hundreds of people sitting outside, and every church bell in town, all the churches agreed that at the key moment of the show where Adams is signing the Declaration of Independence, all the bells went off. They had walkie-talkies in those days, and our stage manager was saying, "Okay, stand by now." And
oh,
all the church bells in town went off at the same time. I'll never forget it.
that must have been amazing.
It was
Absolutely.
unbelievable, unbelievable. We had a
Oh, for the
huge standing
entire town.
ovation.
Oh, I'm sure you did. I am sure you did. That really is a thrill. That must be a memory that will stay with you and
Yeah,
take with you eternally, right?
yeah, never
And that
forget it.
they will have, that you have left behind. Boy, you have certainly left a mark.
And
In
you know, my favorite line from the show out of it was a lyric from the song, but he sings, "Is anybody there?
is
Does anybody care? Does anybody see what I see?"
yes. That
And
I love that song. I love that song. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. I can just see him. As a matter of fact, I always dreamt that some way, somehow, I was part of that. And what was really interesting, and it was at the Tampa I Can Do It, where you were appearing. I believe it was Carolyn Miss was there, and she was performing a meditation. And both my wife and I were there. She went through the meditation. I went through the meditation. She comes out of it and she says, "You are not going to believe what I just saw." I said, "What?" She said, "You were one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence."
oh my
When
golly.
are you saw that? She says, "I swear, Vinny, I'm telling you right now, you were one of the signers. You weren't one of the big people." Oh, sure, of course, I was one of the small people, but it doesn't matter. You saw me there, and that was before she ever knew. I mean, our first date, I took her to the musical 1776
Oh
when it
my
came out in the
gosh.
movie. That
Oh
was
my
the first
gosh.
date. But now here we are doing a meditation, and she winds up visualizing that. And I'm like, I was thrilled to death over that. Really, that was so exciting. It's so exciting for you. And Neale, you've been told this a million and one times. I'm sure you have, but it's okay if I repeat it. You are an icon, and in spirituality, in the metaphysical world, in all the world, in the paranormal world, and now in mainstream as well. It's gone right into the mainstream world, and you have not only opened the door to so many of us to be able to feel normal, to feel comfortable, to be able to say, "Oh, I talk with God." Religious people and Christians and everybody. I used to be, a Catholic that way. I was an altar boy at one point, and we talked to God all the time. But the difference was we never expected a return conversation.
Yeah.
And that's how most people feel. They don't expect. It was when you came out with your first set of books, Conversations with God, that you gave knowledge and permission for people to open that doorway and receive that return. And since then, your book now has been translated, correct me if I'm wrong, 37 different languages at this point. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, absolutely all over the world. And a list of them that, and I have, you see my bookcase back here? They're Neale Donald Walsch books right back there. I have so many of them. And then thank goodness they went to audio because I couldn't read as fast and I wanted to get through all of them. And besides Conversations with God, Communion with God, a Friendship with God, Tomorrow's God, the New Revelations. I mean, on and on and on and on. And then when there were crisis times, you came out with books like When Everything Changes, Change Everything. I absolutely love that one. And also The Storm Before the Calm. Now you have God Talk. And this is, I was listening to a God Talk, Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power. Please, enough of me talking. What inspired you to do this particular book?
Well, it was kind of interesting, Vincent. This has never happened to me before. Normally, when an author has an idea for a book, he goes ahead and writes it, and she might send it to a literary agent who would, shop it around to see if there are any publishers who want to put the book out.
Mhm.
And that's how it went for me for the first 40 books that I wrote. I simply wrote a book and sent it to my literary agent, and they would shop it around. And fortunately, in my case, they found a publisher. But what made this different was my phone rang. That's never happened before. That with a publisher calling me. And it was a lady who owned a publishing company, and she called me and she said, "Would you be willing to write a book for us?" I said, never been invited to write a book. What did you have in mind?" She said, "We'd like you to write a book that explains to people how they can have the experience that you say that you had. How can people have their own conversation with God?" I said, "Well, I never really thought about it in terms of a process, but I can explain, how it worked for me." She said, "Would you be willing to do that in writing?" I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the invitation." So I wrote a book that she titled God Talk, How God Talks to People and How People Talk to God. And the whole business of talking not only to God, but talking about God. Then she did something really interesting, Vince. And I should call you Vince because I like Vince.
That's good. I like Vince.
She decided to put an invitation on the internet and invited anybody else who feels they've ever had the same kind of experience to send her their account of what happened in their life. And she said she got hundreds of emails from people all around the world. She put in the book 7 or 8 of those, what she thought were really the most interesting experiences of what she called divine intervention in people's lives. So the book contains those stories from people all over the world, who explained in their own words how they experienced what I experienced. I simply call it by a different name. I call it Conversations with God. They called it, an epiphany or a sudden inspiration or, women's intuition or whatever they can get away with, because most people wouldn't say,
Right.
"Yeah, God's talking to me." But I had no choice because that was my experience. And so I thought, I'm going to call it exactly how I experienced it. And if nobody wants to publish it, we're talking now about 30 years ago when I had this CWG experience. So I sent it to a publisher because I was told to. I was told in the exchange I was having with God, which was a very private, personal experience, a sacred experience, honestly, Vince, that I never thought anyone else would be privy to. I wasn't sitting down to try to write a book. I was having a personal encounter in my own personal life as a result of some severe challenges that I was facing.
Right.
But in the middle of this dialogue, if you please, on paper dialogue, question, answer, I'm told, "You will make of this, Neale, one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people."
Mm.
And I thought, no, it's not going to happen. Nobody's going to publish a book because a guy claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen. But I thought, you know what? We'll see about that. This is a great way to test the validity of what I'm hearing. Maybe I'm making it all up or imagining it, but the book is nobody's gonna no legitimate publisher is gonna put a book out because a guy claims God's talking to him. So I did. I sent it to 3 or 4 publishers. I didn't send out like 30 or 40 copies, but I think I sent out 4 or 5 copies. And by golly, about 3 weeks later, my phone rang, and the publisher said, "Hey, we'd like to put this book out." I said, "You're kidding me. You're going to put a book out by a guy who," he said, "Yeah, it's a great piece of fiction and people are going to love it." I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is not a piece of fiction.
Right.
You cannot put the book out as a fiction book." He said, "Well, all of our guys here in the intake department. We thought it was a great fictional story about a guy who has an ongoing, argument with God about various topics. I said, no, 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 no. So the guy says to me, Mr. Walsh, are you claiming this actually happened to you in real life? I said, yeah, that's why I sent it to you. It's not a fiction. He said, well, we can put it out as a nonfiction book, but it's not going to find 500 readers because people are not going to buy into a story of some guy up there in Oregon who thinks that God is talking to him. You're not going to find 500 readers. And you know what? He was dead right.
That's right.
The book did not find 500 readers. It found 5 million.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, believable.
Not bragging, just saying.
It is what it is. And it, again, all in the timing, but more importantly, the couple of things that I needed to ask you, but you followed what you believed you heard. And people get that intuitive message all the time, and
all
God
the time
to them all the time. And they have two choices: either believe that it's real or believe that they're making it up and forget it. Don't worry about it.
Especially if it's too good to be true.
Oh my goodness! Especially
when what you're hearing, you imagine you must have imagined it because it's too good to be true. And you know what? I even brought that up in my dialogue with God. I said to God, you know what? The stuff you're telling me is way too good to be true. I can't believe that it's really you telling me this. And you know what God said to me in response? She said, Neale, if God can't be too good to be true, who can?
Yeah. Very profound. Absolutely. So did you have a difficult time at first with that when the conversation was going on? Was it at first you were feeling that maybe you were making this up? Because at that time, if I recall, you weren't in the greatest places, emotionally, physically, financially. There was some difficult stuff going on. So how did you finally accept that this was truth before you put the book out and saw the truth? How were you able to accept that?
Well, the answer to your first question is yes, I did have a challenge with it, especially when I was told certain things like, Neale, there's no such thing as the Ten Commandments.
Oh.
Or when God said to me, Neale, there's no such thing as right and wrong. And made other kinds of statements like there's no place called hell. And I knew I was getting all this stuff, this information, and I thought, this is blasphemy. This is heresy. This can't be God talking. So I really began to worry because of the nature of what I was being told. But then after a while, I realized, oh, you know what? This must be inspiration from the divine. Because I said, why are you telling me this? And God said, I'd like you to change the world's mind about God. Because what the world needs right now is a brand new definition of God. The definition you've had about God, you're a primitive species. Humanity is still a very young species as species in the universe go.
Yeah.
And so you're still a young species and you have a very primitive understanding of the highest power. So your opportunity is to change the world's mind about God. And so I'm telling you, what's really true. And what we need is you to share with the world a new definition of God.
You know what was crazy about that is
everything.
But the fact that 5 million people bought it, 5 million, and now it's it's way past 5 million. There's not even a question of amongst so many of those people, and especially
the rest of us spiritual teachers that you actually had that conversation, that it is real. But the fact that they wanted to believe in it, did believe in it, even if they were skeptical about it, they still read it and finished it and then told their friends about it, goes to show that the truth about who God really is in all of us. And we needed somebody to speak a better truth. Wouldn't you say that that was one of the reasons why it was so accepted, is it resonated somewhere in their hearts?
Yes, that's exactly why. That's precisely why, Vince. I've received through the years, as you can imagine, hundreds and hundreds of emails and letters from people saying exactly that, saying, I knew all along, but finally someone confirmed for me. And I was hearing from people from Germany and from China. The book was published in China, and it was published in Russia. It was published in all the countries of the world, and people were writing me notes and emails, and even a few calls now and then from people saying, finally, someone said out loud what I've been thinking in my mind for so long, that God, can't be how we've imagined God to be. Judgmental, condemning, punishing.
Right.
I was taught I too was raised as a Roman Catholic, and I remember being told when I was 9 years old, I was in third grade, and the priest came in once a week to teach catechism, and he was teaching this particular week about mortal and venial sin, the difference between mortal sin and venial sin. And so mortal sin being a grievous offense against God.
Right, of course.
Venial sin being kind of a spiritual misdemeanor, if you please. Yeah. So I raised my 9-year-old hand. Father, can you give me an example of a mortal sin? He said, oh, certainly. And I'm sure he's going to tell me, murder or embezzlement or stealing something, whatever, but he said, yeah, it's a mortal sin if you miss Mass on Sunday. And I remember thinking, and Vince, it would be the Sunday that I actually missed Mass. 3 days before, he's in our classroom on Wednesday. The Sunday before that, I in fact missed Mass without a good excuse. If you had a good excuse, it was okay. If you're have to be with a sick parent, or if you have to work to make a living for your family, okay, fair enough. But if you have no excuse, you committed a mortal sin. And if you die before you go to confession with that sin on your soul, God will send you to everlasting damnation in the fires of hell for missing church 1 week of your life. Now, I'm 9 years old taking this in, and that happened to be I was an altar boy too, by the way.
Oh,
but that happened to be, I'm an altar boy et cum spiritu tuo. I knew all the Latin responses.
Oh my gosh.
So
Unbelievable. And you know what? And based on that and what we were just talking about, I don't believe there's anything such as an atheist. I believe an atheist doesn't like the current definition of God, that's what he or she doesn't believe. But when you see a person walking around and acting like God traits, and loving and compassionate and caring, there's no way that they can be atheists, because one of the things that lets them be that way is that God connection. They just don't like the way we've defined them. And you have given a different definition, which oh my gosh, is so profound, truly profound.
Of course, the old saying is there are no atheists in foxholes.
Oh, yeah, right. I never heard that one.
Oh, you never heard that?
No, I've never heard that one.
There are no atheists in foxholes.
You're right, because they're all praying, whether they believe in it or not. They are praying in God. Okay. So time went on since that set of books. And of course, you put it in so many different ways. Now, one of my other favorite books right after that was Communion with God. In that book, you list, is it 12 steps that caused us 10? Okay, I was close. All right, 2 more than I thought. 10 steps. 10 steps. That's right, 10.
as to why we got to where we got in the way we were living and our total disconnect with the God source. I love that book, and it's so clearly specifies that it started with this, which led to this, which led to this, which led to this. That was truly brilliant. Again, that was God inspired in a conversation with God about that. Is that correct?
Yes, I was given what God called the 10 illusions of humans.
And illusions of humans, right?
And the first illusion was need, the idea that need exists. You think, God said to me, you think that need exists. And the second illusion of humans is insufficiency. You think that insufficiency exists. And the third illusion, I'm not going to go through all 10, but the third one was the most important. You think that you're separate from God. You believe in separation. You not only think you're separate from God, you think you're separate from each other. So you truly don't understand even the basic, truths about life, that nothing is separate from anything else. Or as God put it in the dialogue with me, Neale, all things are one thing. There is only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. And I said to God, are you trying to tell me that I'm part of you?
Yeah.
And God said, that's precisely what I'm telling you. And I had a hard time grabbing onto that. And God said, okay, Neale, let me use a metaphor. Have you ever been on an ocean liner? I said, yeah, a couple of times in my life. I've been on an ocean liner, a cruise ship. God said, have you ever seen a wave on the ocean? I said, yeah, I've seen waves on the ocean. God said, when you see a wave on the ocean, is the wave something other than the ocean? Or is it simply an individual expression of the ocean arising from the ocean in glorious, powerful individual form? And when the wave completes its individual expression, it recedes back into the ocean whence it came. It's not something other than the ocean. It's simply an individual expression of the ocean. I said, well, yeah, I can understand that. God said, Neale, you are a wave on the ocean of God. So go out there. Then she said, so go out there and make waves.
Oh, I like that part. Go out there and make waves for sure. And that is so important, and it is the most difficult part for many. I won't say everybody at this point, but I'll say there are many, unfortunately, that have a very difficult time believing that they are part, especially when they see their lives, their past, their experiences that don't look anything like it's connected to any kind of a God force at all. And then to be able to, that I find, and I'm sure you find that too, the hardest place to be able to get a person to go is to believe that they're that connected.
Yes. And what works in my life is that I'm not trying to get people to go anywhere. I really have no agenda. I'm not out there trying to convince anyone of anything. I simply put the message out there that I was invited to share, and people, will take it for what it's worth. I even say to people in my live talks, hey, you know what? Take this from the for what it's worth department. And if you don't get any of this, throw it out. Go home and throw the book away. Do not believe anything you see in the book. Simply decide how it relates to your own personal experience.
And I doubt many have ever thrown away any of your books, quite honestly. I don't see any door stoppers with Neale Donald Walsch's name on them. Maybe some others, but definitely not one of yours. But timely again. And I'm sure in your experience in writing all of these books, there have been repeated time periods of stress in the world. Obviously, I mean, that's when right around the time of the storm before the calm, that one, and then you got when everything change everything. Those were all during high crisis periods, especially around the United States area, as well as other parts of the world. And now we're in another one. And so how do you tell people, what do you tell people? I know, okay, the book is great. Definitely people have to go listen to God talk, watch God talk, read God talk, and experience their own experiences and their connections and be able to admit to them and acknowledge them. But what else do you tell people? What can you help people with to be able to know that there's more than what they're really seeing out there?
Well, I do say, in fact, that number one, I say, consider the possibility that there's more going on here than meets the eye. Or as Bill once wrote, I love Bill's take on this. It was Bill who wrote in a play that he authored, there are more things in heaven and earth ratio than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Wow. Yes, there is. And we're very well spoken. My goodness, I love that. You got that actor back in you there, Neale. I don't think you ever get rid of it, do you?
No.
No.
So what I tell people is, then I invite people, I ask God, how am I supposed to deal with what I'm seeing here?
Right.
With the world the way it is. And God gave me a 3-word answer. See the perfection. I said, well, now wait a minute. How do I see this as perfect?
Yeah.
And the answer that I got in my conversation was, have you ever experienced something happening in your own personal life that you thought while it was happening was the worst possible thing that could occur, only to experience 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years later that it was one of the best things that could have happened? Because if that hadn't happened, this other thing that was really good for you could not have happened. You ever had that experience? I said to God, yeah, I've had that experience. God said, well, the master is the one who knows that ahead of time.
Oh, wow. That makes me think a lot, even about my own life and the way I view what's going on. That's
And
is that
God also offered, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but God
no, no.
also offered, God also offered me this. He said, Neale, the purpose of your soul is evolution. You've come here to evolve. That is, you've come here. When I say here, I mean into the realm of the physical, not just on this world, but you've had lives in other places in the universe as well, on other planets. And I said, oh, that explains how sometimes I look up at the night sky and I feel homesick. I look at the Pleiades and I feel homesick. I once turned to my wife one night and I said, feels like I've been there. Feels like I've been there. So God has made it clear to all of us have had lifetimes, many, many lifetimes, many lifetimes on this planet and elsewhere in the universe. But what God said was, all events produce growth. All events, those that are welcome and those that you call unwelcome, ultimately result in your growing and expanding and evolving. It is the process by which sentient beings as a civilization expand and evolve. So evolution emerges or arises as a result of all the events, the unwelcome events as well as the welcome events. So when you see the perfection of everything that's occurring, you see that it is good to remember all that has happened and to see it in its accurate perspective.
That's deep. That's really deep.
And how it looks in my life, to give you one example. I've had a failed marriage. In fact, I had more than one failed marriage. In fact, I had more than 2 failed marriages. But in my life, I've had more than 3 failed marriages. But in my life, I can tell you that, I've had more than 4. Wait a minute, let me just feel it.
Are you going for a record now?
How many failed marriages have I had? No, not live-in partners. I mean, actual put a ring on their finger till death do us part marriages. How many have I had? 7? Okay. I was chatting with God there. She's
Okay.
reminded me. So I've been married 7 times. And my 7th wife is the one I've been with for the past 17 years. Finally, I figured out. But I brought it up for a reason. When those marriages were failing one by one, I thought, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. This is the 4th time this has happened to me. And then later on, this is the 5th time this has happened to me. This is the 6th time. And I kept on thinking, how could things get any worse? And then I realized if those things hadn't occurred, I wouldn't be now with the person that I've been with for the past 17 years. The gift of my life, and not only the gift of my life in terms of the person I'm with, but the bigger gift is that I found a way to be with myself and to be with another that finally demonstrates what pure love is all about. It's not about what I get in return. It's not a quid pro quo. It's not I'll trade you this and you trade me that. It's a whole different way of interacting with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And it was worth the failed marriages for me to finally understand the truth about who I am, who God is, and what true love is really about.
I get that. I do get that.
So it's in that context that I heard see the perfection. And hopefully we can look at what's happening in the world these days and step back far enough before we self-annihilate. If we can stop the process before we annihilate ourselves and have somebody simply stand up and say, folks, do you think there might be a better way? We've had armed conflict on this planet for all but 5% of recorded history.
Right. Right.
But we don't need to continue. We do not need to continue to behave this way.
Okay. That's a point I love. You don't need to. So we don't need to go. The one thing that I didn't hear you say is that God says you need to go through all of that. I mean, I always hear that you throw lemons at us, we make lemonade. Well, I tell the universe or the rest of the world, I'm tired of lemonade. I'd like some iced tea for a change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we repeat these things, but let me ask you this, okay? Spiritual teacher to spiritual teacher, but you're definitely on a different level. But I just had to say that just to make myself feel good for a moment, even including you including me in on you there. Okay. So is it possible that the reason why the perfection eventually comes is because we are one with God and that part of us finally breaks through?
Not only is it possible, that's precisely what happens in the process that we call evolution. People wake up, sadly, one at a time, but ultimately we reach critical mass. And when we reach critical mass in the number of people who understand who we really are and why we're actually here on the planet. See, most people think that who I am is this, my body. Some people think, no, I'm just not just my body, I'm my body and my mind.
Right.
That's who I am. I'm a person with a body and a mind. But still, the minority of people say, no. My body and my mind are simply pieces of equipment.
Right.
Tools that who I really am uses. Who I really am is a spiritual being. And when we understand who we really are and why we're here in the realm of the physical, we begin to live life in a new way. And as we reach critical mass in the number of people who have achieved that level of understanding, I want to call it a level of consciousness. When we reach critical mass, the first domino will fall.
Yes.
I could, of course, be wrong about all of that.
No, I agree with you. I'll validate that that's what I've been receiving as well. The exact same thing as critical mass, which is what I believe the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was about. It was not just about, and it wasn't about God destroying a city. It was about us using the God force to do exactly what we're doing right now. And it was a message that we needed critical mass, which is why Lot had to find 11 people, just 11 people would stop all that devastation. How close do you think we are to critical mass right now at this time, Neale?
I think we're extraordinarily close. I think that we're closer than we think we are. You know, sociologists have come up with a clarity about what critical mass is. It's not 1% more than half. It's not 51%. It's critical mass, we're told by sociologists today, is anywhere between 5 and 10% of the whole number.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're right now at about 7.5% of the people, of the whole number, people who are understanding, there is more going on here than meets the eye. And we are, in fact, individuations of divinity. And there is an agenda of the soul. And there is a way to interact with each other, which is being done, by the way, on other planets in the universe.
Oh, way beyond ours.
It's being done elsewhere, and we can achieve it if we can win this human race and have it happen to us before we self-annihilate. So I think we're very close. All we need are a few more idea heroes. You know, an idea, I talk about that in my book called The God Solution. I talk about what we need on the planet right now are just a handful of idea heroes. Galileo was an idea hero. You know, he said the earth revolves around the sun. The church, of course, taught at that time that the sun revolves around the earth because the church taught that the earth was God's greatest creation and human beings were the pinnacle. And so the sun revolved around the earth. And when Galileo said, actually, I'm sorry, but the earth revolves around the sun, he was condemned, put under house arrest, and condemned by the church. And it took 363 years for the Catholic Church to reverse its condemnation of Galileo and to finally admit publicly, you know what? He was right. So he was an idea hero because an idea hero is someone who puts an idea into the space, knowing ahead of time that the largest number of people are going to disagree and may even condemn you for it. For instance, the world's religions teach us right now, many, not all, but many of the world's religions, of which there are 4,223 currently being practiced on the earth. But most of the world's religions teach us that if you claim that God is talking to you and speaking through you, you're committing blasphemy.
Blasphemy, yes.
It's heresy, and you will be sent to hell. So it takes an idea hero to say, actually, God does talk directly to people. He talks to the Pope. She talks to the Archbishop of Canterbury. He talks to the chief ulama. She talks to the head rabbi. And yes, even to the first baseman for the New York Yankees.
Oh, God, yeah, definitely.
I mean, average people, you don't have to have some kind of huge religious credential to have God speak directly to you. You could just be an ordinary, average, everyday person, and God will speak not only to you, but through you. All you have to do is open yourself to the awareness of who you really are.
How do we bring one of the major reasons, again, and just so that you know, the whole reason why there's over 4,000 religions is because none of them ever got it right, which is the reason why humans went off and broke off and formed another one. Whenever they don't tap into the truth, they go in another direction. So how do you what do you teach people to help bring God closer to them rather than looking at it as this almighty, holier than thou? That's the biggest problem. They made God so out of reach, so high, that we are specks and meaningless. And I keep telling people, how could you be meaningless? You're a child of God. God created you. Can't create anything meaningless. You can't get something minimal and of no value from something of all value. That doesn't happen. How do you, Neale, bring them closer, to feel closer, to be able to just communicate on a daily basis like you and I are talking right now? How do you normalize God to them?
I invite people to explore a question. I say to people, have you ever loved anybody in your life? Did you love your parents? Or if your parents were abusive and you didn't love them, did you ever love anybody at all? Have you ever loved anybody in your life? Most people will say, yes, I've had the experience. I said, so you have experienced what it's like to love someone. And people say, yes, I've experienced that. I said, do you think that God loves you? Well, I don't even know if there is a God. I said, I see. I see. So consider the possibility that there's something we don't fully understand here about God, about life, and about who you are, the understanding of which would change everything. So consider the possibility that we have some unanswered questions. And I tell people, the one thing that our society, our culture, and our religions tell us is that we're not supposed to question the prior assumption. So we have a rule in our culture. Do not question the prior assumption. But then I say to people, this is how I help them understand. I say to people, look, do you think that scientists, when they chance upon a new discovery, do you think they question the prior assumption? That's how they came to the new discovery, by questioning the prior assumption. And in medical science as well, in medicine, how we've come up with cures for things that we couldn't cure when I was a child, and now we have cures for it because we questioned the prior assumption. And the same thing is true when society cures itself. Is our assumption that only men and women can marry? Or can we question that assumption? And is it possible to say people of the same sex can spend their lives together in a loving relationship? And they should, for heaven's sake, they should be able to visit their loved one in a hospital when he's in intensive care.
Oh my
They
God.
shouldn't be restricted because, sorry, you're not a family member. Not a family member? I've lived with the guy for 35 years. What are you telling me? Well, you weren't married. But suddenly Harvey Milk came along, and Harvey Milk said, what if marriage could be engaged in by people of the same gender? Talk about questioning the prior assumption. Gloria Steinem dared to question the prior assumption.
Mm-hmm.
The assumption is that women should be paid less than men, even if they do the exact same job and do it just as well. But they should be paid less than men because they're women. But Gloria Steinem said, actually, no. And she had the nerve to question the prior assumption. But now, dare we question the prior assumption in the topic that we call theology? Dare we question what we assume to be true about the highest power in the universe? Is it possible, just possible, that God is not judgmental, condemning, and punishing? Is it possible, just possible, that God loves us unconditionally, no matter what? Can we believe in a God? But the reason we can't believe in a God like that is because we can't believe in ourselves, that we can't even love the person on the pillow next to us in that way.
Right.
Because we see love as a quid pro quo. It's a trade deal. I'll give you my love if you give me yours. But if you stop giving me what I need from you, the deal is off. And we call that love. But that's not how God loves us. No. God doesn't say, I love you if. God says, I love you because you are my beloved child. Just as you said a moment ago, And you know, I had an out-of-body experience about 25 years ago in which I was told, I was so nervous about it in the middle of the experience because I was in the presence of the divine. And I can remember just holding my head and just bowing down and not wanting to be seen. I didn't want to be seen. I thought, I'm unworthy to be seen. And here's what God said to me. You are my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased.
Mm. Yeah, where would we hear that before? We heard a very important master who was told the exact same thing, who came here to remind us who we are, not who he was. And the same thing was said to him that was said to you.
And the same thing is said to all of us. I don't want people to think that I'm somehow a special case.
No, we're I totally agree with you. Totally agree.
We're all in that same category.
Yes.
And all we have to do is understand who we truly are and why we're really here in the realm of the physical. It's really quite simple.
And I'm telling people that are listening to this right now, Neale and his books, it happens for everybody. And God Talk, to listen to those experiences that people have had in all different ways. And it can come from anything. It can come from a cry out. It can come from any kind of message through a friend, through somebody else. And yes, then I got the ability. I all of a sudden became psychic and a counselor and been able to help people since. And so you're right. And people need to read that book as well as other books. Go back to them and remind them, because that's what I do. Don't you find that it's always best to go back to the core, go back to some of those sources that got you to an understanding, to get you to even a further understanding? What do you advise as far as that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I read my own books, the books that I wrote 30 years ago. I read them over again. I was just reading the book Friendship with God the other day, and we just finished the audio recording of the book Home with God, Life That Never Ends. So yes, yeah. And the advice I give people is, if you find a book that speaks to you and feels true to you, read it over and over again until you have it practically memorized, until you can almost recite it. Go back, go back, go back.
It's what I call working on the core. And the core seems to be the simplest part, but the most difficult practice, because you have to be doing it all the time. I can't believe an hour has gone by already with you. I hate to say goodbye to you, because I know you have such an incredible life. I'll be watching you with all the work that you've done. What would you like to share besides going to your website, which I will be posting in the middle and beginning and all of this during my edits and stuff? Where would you like to send people? Can they still work with you? You used to have a mentorship program. I know you're just finishing up one right now. Isn't that true?
Yes. The best way to stay connected, I created a little website called cwgconnect.com. So all we have to do is go to CWG Connect, and there's a plethora of resources, written and verbal resources, as well as a column that I visit 3 times a day called Ask Neale, where people can communicate with me back and forth and ask me any question they want to ask me about the material in the 9 dialogue books.
That is fabulous. And I cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and to put yourself out there like that and share that. You let people feel that you're just like any of us.
Well, I want to interrupt you and make that clear. It's not my wisdom that I'm sharing. I have no more wisdom than any other person. All I did was take dictation. But am I a messenger? Did I take good dictation? I'm sharing the wisdom that was given to me to share, but it's not Neale's wisdom. I'm no different from anybody else.
Thank you for correcting me on that, because I usually say the same thing. I don't say it enough, but you're absolutely right. This is a wisdom that is within all of us. and that comes from a greater source. So, but thank you. Is there any last words that you want to leave us with, Neale, that can, especially with the times the way they are, that can really instill a good sense of hope? I don't always like using the word hope because it acknowledges or seems like that the possibility isn't there. But what you said is look for the perfection, which means that you don't need hope. You need to believe that there is perfection and that it's already there.
That's a powerful message, but I would, if I was going to have a final word here today, I would share with people what I consider to be the single most important message that I received in conversations with God. And that's when God said to me, Neale, your life is not about you. Your life has nothing to do with you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you understand that and live into that truth, you will discover a universal reality that in the cosmic sense, your life is about you for an elegant reason. There's only one of us in the room.
About us.
There's only one of us in the room.
Oh, I love that. And we're going to all remember that, especially at this time. And we're going to practice that. And I'm going to do the best I can, Neale, to get those words out there just like that. And so for everyone out there who has joined us today, this isn't the Genna effect. It's the name of the podcast, but it truly is the God effect. So thank you, Neale, for your time today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And remember, everybody, God talk.